Then all grew still, nothing moved anymore. Immobile, self-wrapped, timeless, solitary, a silent spirit pervaded silent space. In that absolute stillness, bare and formidable, there was glimpsed an all-negating void supreme that claimed its mystic nihil sovereign right to cancel nature and deny the soul. A vacant consciousness watched from within, empty of all but bare reality. There was no will behind the word and act, no thought formed in her brain to guide the speech. An impersonal emptiness walked and spoke in her, something perhaps unfelt, unseen, unknown, guarded the body for its future work, or nature moved in her old stream of force. Perhaps she bore, made conscious in her breast, the miraculous nihil, origin of our souls, and source and sum of the vast world's events, the womb and grave of thought, a cipher of God, a zero circle of being's totality. It used her speech and acted in her acts. It was beauty in her limbs, life in her breath. The original mystery wore her human face. Thus was she lost within to separate self. Her mortal ego perished in God's night. Only a body was left, the ego's shell, afloat mid drift and foam of the world sea, a sea of dream watched by a motionless sense in a figure of unreal reality. Yet all was not extinct in this deep loss. The being travelled not towards nothingness. There was some high surpassing secrecy, and when she sat alone with Satyavan, her moveless mind with his that searched and strove, in the hush of the profound and intimate night, she turned to the face of a veiled, voiceless truth, hid in the deep recesses of the heart, or waiting beyond the last peak climbed by thought. Unseen itself, it sees the struggling world and prompts our quest, but cares not to be found. Out of that distant vast came a reply. Something unknown, unreached, inscrutable, sent down the messages of its bodiless light, cast lightning's flashes of a thought not ours, crossing the immobile silence of her mind. In its might of irresponsible sovereignty, it seized on speech to give those flaming shape, made beat the heart of wisdom in a word, and spoke immortal things through mortal lips. These thoughts were formed not in her listening brain. Her vacant heart was like a stringless harp. Impassive the body claimed not its own voice, but let the luminous greatness through it pass. A dual power at being's occult poles still acted, nameless and invisible. Her divine emptiness was their instrument. Inconscient nature dealt with the world it had made, and using still the body's instruments, slipped through the conscious void she had become. The superconscient mystery through that void missioned its word to touch the thoughts of men. As yet this great impersonal speech was rare, but now the unmoving wide spiritual space in which her mind survived, tranquil and bare, admitted a traveller from the cosmic breadths. A thought came through, draped as an outer voice. It called not for the witness of the mind, it spoke not to the hushed receiving heart, it came direct to the pure perception's seat, an only center now of consciousness, if center could be where all seemed only space, no more shut in by bodies, walls and gates, her being a circle without circumference, already now surpassed all cosmic bounds and more spread into infinity. This being was its own unbounded world, a world without form of feature or circumstance. It had no ground, no wall, no roof of thought, yet saw itself and looked on all around in a silence motionless and illimitable. There was no person there, no centered mind, no seat of feeling on which beat events or objects wrought and shaped reaction stress. There was no motion in this inner world. All was a still and even infinity. In her, the unseen, the unknown, waited his hour. But now she sat by sleeping Satyavan, awake within, and the enormous night surrounded her with the unknowables vast. A voice began to speak from her own heart that was not hers, yet mastered thought and sense. As it spoke, all changed within her and without. All was, all lived, she felt all being one. The world of unreality ceased to be. There was no more a universe built by mind, convicted as a structure or a sign. A spirit, a being, saw created things and cast itself into unnumbered forms and was what it saw and made. All now became an evidence of one stupendous truth, a truth in which negation had no place, a being and a living consciousness, a stark and absolute reality. Yet this was the same indecipherable. It seemed to cast from its universe like a dream, vanishing forever into an original void. But this was no more some vague ubiquitous point or a cipher of vastness in unreal naught. It was the same, but now no more seemed far to the living clasp of her recovered soul. It was herself, it was the self of all, it was the reality of existing things, it was the consciousness of all that lived and felt and saw, it was timelessness and time, it was the bliss of formlessness and form, it was all love and the one beloved's arms, it was sight and thought in one all-seeing mind, it was joy of being on the peaks of God. She passed beyond time into eternity, slipped out of space and became the infinite. Her being rose into unreachable heights and found no end of its journey in the self. It plunged into the unfathomable deeps and found no end to the silent mystery that held all world within one lonely breast, yet harbored all creation's multitudes. She was all vastness and one measureless point. She was a height beyond heights, a depth beyond depths. She lived in the everlasting and was all that harbors death and bears the wheeling hours. All contraries were true in one huge spirit, surpassing measure, change and circumstance. An individual, one with cosmic self, in the heart of the transcendent's miracle and the secret of world personality, was the Creator and the Lord of all. Her spirit saw the world as living God. It saw the One and knew that all was He. She knew Him as the absolute self-space, one with herself and ground of all things here, in which the world wanders seeking for the truth, guarded behind its face of ignorance. She followed Him through the march of endless time. All nature's happenings were events in her. The heartbeats of the cosmos were her own. All beings thought and felt and moved in her. She inhabited the vastness of the world. Its distances were her nature's boundaries, its closenesses were her life's intimacies. Her mind became familiar with its mind. Its body was her body's larger frame, in which she lived and knew herself in it, one, multitudinous in its multitudes. She was a single being, yet all things. The world was her spirit's wide circumference. The thoughts of others were her intimates, their feelings close to her universal heart, their bodies her many bodies kin to her. She was no more herself, but all the world. Out of the infinitudes all came to her. Into the infinitudes sentient she spread. Infinity was her own natural home. Nowhere she dwelt, her spirit was everywhere. The distant constellations wheeled round her. Earth saw her born, all worlds were her colonies. The greater worlds of life and mind were hers. All nature reproduced her in its lines. Its movements were large copies of her own. She was the single self of all these selves. She was in them and they were all in her. This first was an immense identity in which her own identity was lost. What seemed herself was an image of the whole. She was a subconscient life of tree and flower, the outbreak of the honeyed buds of spring. She burned in the passion and splendor of the rose. She was the red heart of the passion flower, the dream white of the lotus in its spoon. Out of subconscient life she climbed to mind. She was thought and the passion of the world's heart. She was the Godhead hid in the heart of man. She was the climbing of his soul to God. The cosmos flowered in her. She was its bed. She was time and the dreams of God in time. She was space and the wideness of his days. From this she rose where time and space were not. The superconscient was her native air. Infinity was her movement's natural space. Eternity looked out from her on time. So was she left alone in the huge wood, surrounded by a dim, unthinking world, her husband's corpse on her forsaken breast. Then suddenly there came on her the change which in tremendous moments of our lives can overtake sometimes the human soul and hold it up towards its luminous source. The veil is torn, the thinker is no more. Only the spirit sees and all is known. Then a calm power seated above our brows is seen, unshaken by our thoughts and deeds. Its stillness bears the voices of the world. Immobile it moves nature, looks on life. It shapes immutably its far-seen ends. Untouched and tranquil amid error and tears, and measureless above our striving wills, its gaze controls the turbulent whirl of things. To mate with the glory it sees, the spirit grows. The voice of life is tuned to infinite sounds. The moments on great wings of lightning come, and godlike thoughts surprise the mind of earth. Into the soul's splendor and intensity, a crescent of miraculous birth is tossed, whose horn of mystery floats in a bright void, as into a heaven of strength and silence thought is ravished. All this living mortal clay is seized, and in a swift and fiery flood of touches shaped by a harmonist unseen. A new sight comes, new voices in us form, a body of the music of the gods. Immortal yearnings without name leap down, large quiverings of Godhead seeking run, and weave upon a puissant field of calm a high and lonely ecstasy of will. This in a moment's depths was born in her. Now to the limitless gaze disclosed that sees things barred from human thinking's earthly lids, the spirit who had hidden in nature soared out of his luminous nest within the worlds. Like a vast fire it climbed the skies of night. Thus were the cords of self-oblivion torn. Like one who looks up to far heights she saw, ancient and strong as on a windless summit, above her where she had worked in her lone mind, laboring apart in a soul tower of self, the source of all which she had seemed or wrought, a power projected into cosmic space, a slow embodiment of the aeonic will, a starry fragment of the eternal truth, the passionate instrument of an unmoved power. A presence was there that filled the listening world. A central all assumed her boundless life. A sovereignty, a silence, and a swiftness, one brooded over the abysses. Who was she? As in a choric robe of unheard sounds, a force descended trailing endless lights, linking time's seconds to eternity. Illimitably it girt the earth and her. It sank into her soul and she was changed. Then, like a thought fulfilled by some great word, that mightiness assumed a symbol form. Her being's spaces quivered with its touch. It covered her as with immortal wings. On its lips the curve of the unuttered truth, a halo of wisdom's lightnings for its crown. It entered the mystic lotus in her head, a thousand-petaled home of power and light. Immortal leader of her mortality, doer of her works and fountain of her words, invulnerable by time, omnipotent, it stood above her, calm, immobile, mute. All in her mated with that mighty hour, as if the last remnant had been slain by death of the humanity that once was hers, assuming a spiritual wide control, making life see a mirror of heaven's sky, the young divinity in her earthly limbs, filled with celestial strength her mortal part. A moment yet she lingered motionless and looked down on the dead man at her feet. Then, like a tree recovering from a wind, she raised her noble head. Fronting her gaze, something stood there, unearthly, somber, grand, a limitless denial of all being that wore the terror and wonder of a shape. In its appalling eyes, the tenebrous form bore the deep pity of destroying gods. A sorrowful irony curved the dreadful lips that speak the word of doom. Eternal night, in the dire beauty of an immortal face, pitying arose, receiving all that lives forever into its fathomless heart, refuge of creatures from their anguish and world pain. His shape was nothingness made real, his limbs were monuments of transience, and beneath brows of unwearying calm, large godlike lids, silent beheld the writhing serpent life. Unmoved their timeless, wide, unchanging gaze had seen the unprofitable cycles pass, survived the passing of unnumbered stars, and sheltered still the same immutable orbs. The two opposed each other with their eyes, woman and universal God, around her piling their void, unbearable loneliness upon her mighty, uncompanioned soul. Many inhuman solitudes came close. Vacant eternities, forbidding hope, laid upon her their huge and lifeless look, and to her ears, silencing earthly sounds, a sad and formidable voice arose, which seemed the whole adverse worlds. Unclasp, it cried, thy passionate influence, and relax, O slave of nature, changing tool of changeless law, who vainly writhest rebellious to my yoke, thy elemental grasp. Weep and forget. Entomb thy passion in its living grave. Leave now the once loved spirit's abandoned robe. Pass lonely back to thy vain life on earth. And Savitri looked on death and answered not. Almost it seemed as if in his symbol shape the world's darkness had consented to heaven light, and God needed no more the inconscient screen. A mighty transformation came on her. A halo of the indwelling deity, the immortal's lustre that had lit her face and tinted its radiance in her body's house, overflowing, made the air a luminous sea. In a flaming moment of apocalypse, the incarnation thrust aside its veil. A little figure in infinity yet stood and seemed the Eternal's very house, as if the world's center was her very soul, and all wide space was but its outer robe. A curve of the calm hotter of far heaven, descending into earth's humility, her forehead span vaulted two stars that watched the universe, the power that from her being's summit drained, the presence chambered in lotus secrecy, came down and held the center in her brow, where the mind's lord in his control room sits. There throned on concentration's native seat, he opened that third mysterious eye in man, the unseen's eye that looks at the unseen, when light with a golden ecstasy fills his brain, and the Eternal's wisdom drives his choice, and eternal will seizes the mortal's will. It stirred in the lotus of her throat of song, and in her speech throbbed the immortal word. Her life sounded with the steps of the world soul, moving in harmony with the cosmic thought. As glides God's Son into the mystic cave, where hides his light from the pursuing gods, it glided into the lotus of her heart and woke in it the force that alters fate. It poured into her navel's lotus depth, lodged in the little life nature's narrow home. On the body's longings grew heaven rapture's flower, and made desire a pure celestial flame. Broke into the cave where coiled world energy sleeps, and smote the thousand-hooded serpent force that blazing towered and clasped the world's self above, joined matter's dumbness to the spirit's hush, and filled earth's acts with the spirit's silent power. Thus changed, she waited for the word to speak. Eternity looked into the eyes of death, and darkness saw God's living reality. Then a voice was heard that seemed the stillness itself, or the low, calm utterance of infinity when it speaks to the silence in the heart of sleep. I hail thee, almighty and victorious death, thou grandiose darkness of the infinite, O void that makest room for all to be, hunger that gnawest at the universe, consuming the cold remnants of the suns, and eatest the whole world with thy jaws of fire, waster of the energy that has made the stars, inconscience, carrier of the seeds of thought, nescience in which all knowledge sleeps entombed and slowly emerges in its hollow breast, wearing the mind's mask of bright ignorance, thou art my shadow and my instrument. I have given thee thy awful shape of dread and thy sharp sword of terror and grief and pain, to force the soul of man to struggle for light on the brevity of his half-conscious days. Thou art his spur to greatness in his works, the whip to his yearning for eternal bliss, his poignant need of immortality. Live, death, a while, be still my instrument. One day man too shall know thy fathomless heart of silence and the brooding peace of night, and grave obedience to eternal law, and the calm, inflexible pity in thy gaze. But now, O timeless mightiness, stand aside and leave the path of my incarnate force. Relieve the radiant God from thy black mask. Release the soul of the world called Satyavan, freed from thy clutch of pain and ignorance, that he may stand master of life and fate, man's representative in the house of God, the mate of wisdom and the spouse of light, the eternal bridegroom of the eternal bride. She spoke. Death unconvinced resisted still, although he knew, refusing still to know, although he saw, refusing still to see. The two opposed each other face to face. His being like a huge fort of darkness towered. Around it her life grew an ocean siege. A while the shade survived, defying heaven, assailing in front, oppressing from above. A concrete mass of conscious power, he bore the tyranny of her divine desire. A pressure of intolerable force weighed on his unbowed head and stubborn breast. Light like a burning tongue licked up his thoughts. Light was a luminous torture in his heart. Light coursed a splendid agony through his nerves. His darkness muttered, perishing in her blaze. Her mastering word commanded every limb and left no room for his enormous will that seemed pushed out into some helpless space and could no more re-enter, but left him void.
It is thou who livest in me, thou alone.